What up, LVP youth? It is day 7 of our quarantine, and I hope you all are having a good time, or as good as you can be. I know it's a little more difficult for some of us social butterflies who really like seeing people and being around people. The introverts are surviving right now, for sure. But I hope you guys are having a good time. Had a good spring break, even though your spring breaks looked a little different this year than they have in the past, I'm sure. Again, for probably my social butterflies, some of you introverts are probably like, it's this exact same. But, so as you may know, SNU has closed down for the rest of the semester. So I'm here at home. This is my home in Tulsa. And I still wanted to be able to connect with you guys and to share the word, use our ways of communication that we have right now to share with you our lesson for this week, the lesson I was supposed to give last week before church got canceled. I would encourage you guys to find a little quiet spot in your room, or for me, in the office, wherever you can kind of get away from your family right now and just listen and hone in. It's going to be a little different because, this is a lot of like asking questions and giving responses, and obviously I will try to not ask as many questions because you guys won't respond in person at least. But I think it'd be really good for you guys to hone in and listen, and heck, grab a journal, grab your Bible, and if Monty will let me, I really hope to do a few more of these, not just from our handy dandy book, but maybe some more that I come up with, because even though I won't be back to see you guys, I really enjoy being your intern, and I really enjoy talking to you all, and I really want to still connect with you guys. So anyway, we're going to start this week's lesson. It's actually about Moses' calling, which, if you were there a few Wednesdays ago, I can't remember exactly when it was. It was right before we watched the symphony thing. I talked about Moses' calling, and I talked about it in a framework of it's okay when we ask questions and when we doubt, because everyone does, and it's just a normal human thing that happens as long as we push past those questions. So it's okay to have questions and to have doubts, but we need to express those to others, because that's how we get through it, and that's how we push past it. But anyway, this week we will be talking about Moses' calling again, but in a little bit different framework. Not focusing as much on his doubting, but focusing more on how God called him and equipped him even before he knew. So how would you feel if somebody came up to you and just told you to take out their appendix? It'd be kind of scary, right? Like, I'd be more scared for that person, because, like, I can't cut an apple right, let alone cut a human without killing them. I am not a trained surgeon, and I can imagine none of you are trained surgeons either who could cut out somebody's appendix. I mean, I've watched my fair share of, like, doctor medical shows, but I still don't think I can do it. So, it's very necessary to be equipped to handle certain tasks, right? Like, we're not going to do a surgery if we don't know how to do surgery. You're not going to go be a lifeguard at a pool all of a sudden if you've never had any kind of lifeguard training. Or I wouldn't try to fix the oil on your car because I know nothing about your car. There are things that we need and that we need training for in life. Sometimes there are things we are called to do and called to act upon that we don't feel adequately equipped for, right? There are things our parents ask us to do, things God asks us to do that we don't feel like we're equipped for. So today we're going to look at, like I said, Moses' call. And this call really began shaping the history of his people. This was the first action made that really pushed his people, God's people, through. God not only called Moses, but he equipped him to fulfill that call. So for a few weeks now, we've been studying different things about our faith in Genesis, and today we are moving to Exodus. So the word Exodus actually means to leave, and the Exodus story is how God led his people out of Egypt to leave Egypt. Fun fact. So you should all know kind of roughly how the story of Moses begins. The Pharaoh at the time that Moses was born made an order to go out and kill all of the firstborn kids in the Hebrew people. And so Moses' mother puts him in a basket, sends him down a river. Pharaoh's daughter picks up Moses, and Moses ends up actually living in Pharaoh's palace until he finds out he's a Hebrew. He goes out, he runs away from the palace. He sees one day an Egyptian man kind of beating up a Hebrew man, and he kills the Egyptian man. So he runs away from that, ends up marrying this girl Sarah, and now we're kind of here. He's a shepherd, and we're here. We actually found ourselves in one of the most incredible encounters in scripture. It's pretty cool. The nation of Israel is in bondage in Egypt. God hears their cries for help, and he needs somebody who can lead them out of this oppression to the promised land. So, I'm going to read Exodus 3, 1 through 17. If you have a Bible at home, you can follow along. I read out of the NRSV version, by the way, so if it sounds a little different, I'm sorry, because most of you guys read the NIV. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at the great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He said, I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on the mountain. But Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, This you should say to the Israelites, I am sent me to you. God also said to Moses, This you shall say to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations. Go and assemble the elders of Israel, and say to them, The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have given heed to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt. I declare that I will bring you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. Let's go back through that, because that was a pretty long passage. So, one day, Moses was out tending his sheep. God appeared to him in flames of fire. through a burning bush. And I feel like oftentimes when we talk about this burning bush like it was this huge sign from God. And actually, interesting enough, the burning bush would have been perfectly normal. Back then, where he was in Egypt in the wilderness, a burning bush, they burned all the time. And the bushes dried up and there was no more water and they were in a drought and the heat and everything, they would just kind of combust. So the burning bush would have been perfectly normal. In fact, the fact that Moses took 2 seconds to look at it and realize that it was burning but not being consumed probably was weird for most people, that he would have even thought about it further than, hey, that bush is burning. But then God says to him, I've indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and bring them up of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites of Egypt. And Moses listens to God. But his feelings of being inadequate soon surface. Moses immediately begins trying to convince God that he has the wrong person. He even tells, he says to him, who am I that I should go talk to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Like, this is not my scene. I want you to contemplate on how you think you would have reacted if you were Moses in this situation. I know for me personally, I probably would have had a pretty same reaction, like, this is not my scene. Like, I am not powerful enough to do that. Like, who am I against Pharaoh, the king? Like, I would not feel qualified whatsoever to do that. And I'm sure most of you wouldn't either. So what does this mean for us? Well, God still uses Moses, right? God equips Moses in those situations. When Moses says, well, I don't got a name for you, God. Like, you're just kind of this being. Like, you're just every other God right now. Like, what am I supposed to say? God equips him. He gives him a name. I am who I am, or Yahweh. When Moses says, I don't speak well, God gives him a helper to help him speak and to help him. He equips him with everything he needs to go on this journey and to lead everything. The more you look through Exodus, the more you find that God equips Moses over and over and over again with everything he needs. Remember, God equips those who he calls. He only asks that we have faith and we trust to follow his lead. If Moses had just said, nah, I ain't gonna do it. No, not risking it. And left that burning bush, God would have still had that bush burning. And he would have still called somebody else to go get all his people out of Egypt. So it meant everything that Moses said, okay, I'll go. I'll do it. It's crazy, but I'll do it. Moses thought he had nothing to offer to God. But God saw in Moses someone he could use to lead his people out of Egyptian slavery and into the promised land. So we can't allow our past or our present circumstances keep us from being used by God to impact our world. Actually, I feel like if there was ever a time to use things for God's kingdom to impact the world, it's right now. There's so much we can do by just sharing things on social media. We all have Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, and we can use them to our advantage, to God's advantage, I should say. Let's do it. Post things, snap people, keep in contact with those that seem super far away. We've got this, especially right now. These problems can seem super overwhelming, and it can seem like we're being faced with this unbearable thing. But if you think about it, Moses probably thought that too. I mean, I can only imagine that moments before going in talking to Pharaoh, that he was just, his anxiety levels were through the roof and he was so scared. But he still did it. He let God use him, even though that he was terrified. And he's the same God, the God that used Moses to get his people out of Egypt, is the same God who cares about this world and the impact we have on it. Right now, you guys have so much power in your hands with social media. So I'd encourage you guys to keep doing things. Spread hope and joy in this time that can seem really overwhelming to some of us. Share sermons. Share this video or other videos. Let your friends know what you're doing. Take time while you have it right now to start building up some more devotional times in your life. Take time to sit still and listen to God, because we have the time right now. Post inspiring messages on Instagram. Maybe just maybe one of your friends will see it and it'll put a smile on their face, which doesn't seem like a lot right now, but actually is a big thing. A smile's good. Reach out to people. FaceTime, Zoom, Skype. Is that even still a thing? I know you can FaceTime with Snapchat. Do that. Talk to people still. Still try to be social and try to, work your webs outside of just yourself. When things become too much, reach out. I know being at home with our families sometimes can be kind of hard. Our families sometimes get on our nerves, but it's okay. It's gonna be okay. And most of all, see the good in the situation. It might be hard. It might be difficult. You might start to get on your siblings' nerves and they might start to get on yours. But, take this time you have right now to spend with your family. Because with all of us being in school, we don't get a lot of time to spend with our families. Especially if you have extracurricular activities and things like that. Maybe pick up a new trade, learn how to knit or crochet. I know it's kind of dorky, but it's kind of fun too. Learn to play a new instrument, or learn how to do a cartwheel or a backflip or something. Just don't hurt yourself, please. Take this time to develop yourself and to see the good in this situation. Make something good out of it and let God use you for the way He wants you. So as we close, we have 3 things to remember. The first one, God calls us to be His hands and feet in this world. This calling is not based on what we can do, but what God can do through us. When God works through us, we can do so much more. Number 2, we, like Moses, probably feel inadequate. But God promises to equip us to fulfill the mission He calls us to. God's not going to leave you hanging on a thread. If He calls you to do something, He's going to give you everything you need to do it. And number 3, we must be receptive to God's voice and obey His calling. It's not about our gifts and talents, but our willingness to be available to God's leading and equipping. When Jesus began His earthly ministry, He read from a scroll of Isaiah. And perhaps this mission is just as true for us as it was for Him back then. So I'm going to read this, and this is going to be our closing. And again, I know I'm in Tulsa, but I really want to hear from you guys. And I'm going to keep texting you. I'm going to keep in contact. And I really hope that you guys keep in contact with me too, because I want to be a part of your lives. And if you guys have any prayer requests, please send them to Monty or I, because we will always be praying for you, but we want to know how we can specifically pray for you. And if you guys, want to get coffee and sit outside or something, I'd be down to make a trip down there for you guys, any of you. So please reach out, because I still care for you guys. I still love you guys. So anyway, I'm going to read these words from Isaiah 61, 1-3, and then I'll let you guys get back to your day. And I hope you guys have an amazing time on this quarantine and do everything you can and keep up with your schoolwork. Stay inside. Stay out of trouble. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from the darkness of the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the days of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord, for the display of his splendor. Have an amazing week. Peace. Why am I so bad at this? You're not. You sound good. Thanks, Mom.